and our webinar for today is titled Using Data-Driven Social Stories, and we are happy to be joined by our speakers, Emily Goodman-Scott and Judy O'Rourke-Trejani. Ladies, you now have the floor.
Good afternoon. My name is Judy O'Rourke-Trejani, and I have been an elementary school counselor for 24 years for the state of Virginia, local DC suburbs. Before that, I was also a GED teacher on the Maryland-DC line, and I'm currently the mom of 2 boys. I am presenting to you today from my school in McLean, Virginia.
Emily, do we
Seems like we're having...
Yeah, it sounds like, Emily, we've lost your sound.
Hello. It looks like my session ended, and I think I'm back on. I apologize for that. We have a lot of wind here, so I think that's impacting things. So again, I'm not sure what you all heard, but welcome. My name is Dr. Emily Goodman-Scott, and we have Dr. Judy O'Rourke-Trejani as well, and we are thrilled to be your first 2017 ASCA webinar presenters. So today we will be talking to you about social stories. So to go ahead and get started, we're going to start with introduction. So first of all, my name is, as I mentioned my name, and I'm currently a faculty member and assistant professor at Old Dominion University in Virginia. I am about 3 hours outside of DC. I actually used to live in the Northern Virginia area. So more background on me is I started out as a special education teacher for children with autism. And then I was an elementary school counselor. I had the privilege of opening a new elementary school in Northern Virginia several years ago, so that was absolutely fantastic. And then I received my master's in school counseling and PhD in counselor education from Virginia Tech. And I just started my 4th year as an assistant professor at ODU, focusing on school counseling and counseling children and adolescents. And in addition to that, I am the school counseling coordinator, so I love all things school counseling. And Judy and I met probably 10 years ago or so when I was in my master's program, and Judy was assigned to me as my supervisor. So she was my school counseling supervisor, and I was an intern. And we met, and we really bonded over our love for social stories. So I'm going to, Judy, if you want to introduce yourself next.
I'm Dr. Judy O'Rourke-Trejani. We're so glad to have you with us today. We're really passionate about social stories, and we can't wait to share those with you. I am an elementary school counselor. I have been for the last 24 years for Fairfax County Public Schools. For the last 3 years, I've also worked as adjunct faculty at the University of the District of Columbia. Before that, I worked a lot with GED and fire safety populations on the Maryland-DC line. I am a native Marylander, but I do work in Virginia in the DC suburbs. I'm also a mother of 2 active little boys, for those of you who are soccer moms out there. And we are excited to present to you today about social stories. We do have an autism center here at my school, as well as children from all over the world. I apologize, I am presenting for my school, and that can be unpredictable at times, as I know as school counselors understand.
That is a great note, Judy. So on that note, as Judy's in the school, you may hear intercom, children, little bits here and there. For myself, I'm working from home this afternoon, so I can have as much quiet as possible, but I still may have the mailman and the dog in the background. So just a little disclaimer for you all. So that's a little bit about us. I wonder about you all. Could you tell us what level you are? We'd love to hear so we can kind of tailor our presentation a bit. And I think Jen will help us with that.
All right.
So we're interested in whether you're elementary, middle, high, or other. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we have the poll going right now, and we have wow, it's a pretty even split. We have about 30% elementary, 30 or 40% middle, and about 30% high, and 11% other.
Wonderful. So we have a
Very good.
PowerPoint
Thank you. Good to know.
that we're going to go through. These are the learning outcomes. We'll just give everyone a quick chance to read over what we're going to learn today. Okay. Now, we want to know what your students' social needs are, and you're going to have an opportunity to put those in, and we hope to address them throughout our presentation and in the end in the question sections.
Yes, so if you could type in the question section, the answer to this question, what are your students' social needs? I'll be able to relay that information to the presenters. So in the question section on the right-hand side of your screen there, you should see an option to type in some responses.
We'll give everyone a moment or two to do that, and then we'll move on to our presentation.
Okay, we do have some coming in here.
Great.
All right, socioeconomic stressors, healthy relationships, coping skills, preventative education, need for independence and power, need for friendships and fun, need assistance with links and resources for teachers in special education classes, meeting and making friends, assistance with parent resources, to feel like they belong, like the teachers actually care whether they are present or not. And hold on, we have a couple more coming in actually. Ability to build friendships and relate to peers and staff and communicate physical and emotional needs to others, need for ability to self-regulate. And for middle level 6 through 8, students have some difficulty with maintaining friendships. And yes, we had somebody ask if that was the correct way to respond, and yes, it's through this questions panel. Thank you. And I think that's all that,
Okay.
We have one more, financial literacy and future planning.
Okay, well, we're going to give some background on social stories. The good news is all those issues can be addressed through social stories. You can tailor them to meet the needs of your population, and you can also tailor the characters in your book to meet the students in your school. We have a very diverse student body here, and when we do these stories, we want to make sure that all of our children are represented in their cultures and ethnicities as well. So, quick background information. Social stories are evidence-based practices to improve social behavior and communicative functioning, especially in youth. And we've used these with children from all different countries, from all different SES levels. It began for children with autism. That's where the social stories originally came from. But it's certainly something that can apply to every population. And sometimes
absolutely. And one thing as well is looking at social stories here on the slide is an evidence-based practice as well. And we'll talk about some of the research that backs that up in just a minute.
And when you choose to do this, there's lots of good information you can share with your stakeholders and you can share with your principal. Just some quick background. Carol Gray was the original creator of social stories. Since then, they've grown where there's many different social studies that we've published and other people have published to help children through different life challenges. It tells a story and it uses pictures to explain a situation, to prepare students, and to show expected behaviors. And we have to be careful when we're working with students because some students do not know the correct behaviors. And sometimes we assume they know, for example, not to hit another person. One of my students very articulately said to me, and you're going to hear about his case a little bit later in this presentation, in my family we solve problems with our fist. He didn't know that there were other ways to solve problems. So this is a great way to teach expected behaviors. And it also uses visuals, and visuals are really important from the research to help children with autism and children with ADHD. But really, it's a good way to communicate information and get information into the brain that helps the child remember what skills we want them to be using out in the school, home, and community environment. And as you know, in our country, we are struggling with literacy as well. And this is another way, to put a book in the hand of a child and to build those literacy skills. And you can develop these on your own through PowerPoint or Word, or our favorite program is BoardMaker. And now that's also available online. Or you can use pre-created stories. We're going to share some of those today, or you can create your own. And you can individualize it, ideally, to the child that you're working with. You want to have the characters match and be someone the child can identify with. The school library journal really did a lot of great research on appropriate books for children, and most children ask for books with characters like them. So when you write your book, you want your child to be part of that process and to pick characters that resemble them so they can identify with the expected behaviors. And we have a lot of buy-in for the social stories with our special ed teachers, with our parents, with our general ed teachers, because we give them copies with the family's permission, and then the families can reinforce the behaviors at home. The special education and general education teachers can reinforce the skills in their classrooms as well. So everyone has the same language, the same message, a visual to communicate to the child. And it also tells the child that those behaviors aren't just expected in the school counselor's office. They're expected in the community, the home, and the school environment.
And this is Emily. I'm going to chime in a little bit here too. Great overview, Judy. So a couple other things to add. So as Judy mentioned, although Carol Gray developed these initially for children with autism, they've been expanded to not only typically developing children, so children in the general education system, for whether it's adjustment, maybe they're getting ready to move, or family members going on deployment, or a parent just getting incarcerated, to help explain what's going on. I've also seen this used for children who are English language learners. So maybe they've come to the U.S. and some of these simple words and using pictures can help them to better understand concepts, or maybe culturally different traditions. Maybe Judy shared a story with me where a family member from another country said, "What is Valentine's Day? What is this Valentine's Day? I don't know what it is." So explaining concepts as well. So, and also preparing students. Sometimes students may have anxiety. Anxiety rates are huge in our schools across the country, and I think in society in general. So looking at anxiety, we've used social stories for children to help them prepare for an event. For example, I was talking with a school counselor who they said that their student was very much afraid of costumes when folks would dress in like the Chick-fil-A cow or Mickey Mouse would have these costumes on. And the Chick-fil-A cow was coming to their elementary school, and the student was very anxious about that. Or the student didn't know. It was going to be a surprise for the students when they got off the bus. They would see the Chick-fil-A cow there. And the school counselor, knowing this child had some anxiety, wrote a social story for the student in advance, saying, when I will see this character, I will get off the bus, I can choose to give a wave or a high five, or I can walk past them. So again, preparing them for an event. So that time spent in advance preparing them for the event would have been better than the child having a meltdown in the moment. Or another child who had a lot of anxiety about a spelling bee, or going to somewhere for a field trip. So preparing them in advance for these things. My sister, wrote a social story for her children when the latest child was born, saying, we're going to have a new baby in our family. This is what's going to happen. They're going to go to the hospital, deliver a baby. The baby will come home. So it's great to explain a situation, as well as older children who, again, have some challenges with social issues. So showing a student what's going on, helping with coping strategies. I work with another child who had anxiety about tornadoes. So we wrote a story about when a tornado happens. This is what the tornado drill will look like, etc. And as Judy said very well, we love to sit down at our desk and individualize a social story. So sitting down, bringing up Microsoft Word, and saying together, here, let's write this. Let's use the children's words. And often I would ask family members or teachers to provide some input. So we make sure that the language is culturally appropriate and sensitive to that family and appropriate with that family and their traditions and their words, as well as if the classroom teacher is calling something centers and we're calling it rotations, what can we do to make the language fit the classroom where the child is going into? And again, having that connection. So if we're working on a goal with a child, knowing that in order to generalize, it needs to be practiced in other settings as well. So again, we can't speak enough about our love for social stories and how we've seen it work with so many different types of students for so many different goals. And family members and teachers sing praises of social stories as well.
And even for things, for those of you who are in high school and middle school, hygiene, how to communicate what is expected, how do you take care of your body? We've used it for when children have difficulty remembering to blow their nose properly. For transitions into kindergarten, out of 6th grade, into high school. They need to know what to expect, and that's very important. Going to the hospital, any major change that they may be going through a divorce. We have many children that are struggling with that. Again, it's a way to teach them that's very direct and teach them what's expected and what are some things they may have a harder time with and what are some coping skills that they can use. Sometimes even when a teacher leaves for maternity leave, that's a big change for our children on the autism spectrum in particular, and preparing them for that. We've even used real-life pictures of the people. So when they come to this transition, they know who that person is and what to expect.
Very good. The next slide is on the types of sentences, and you all have these in your notes. So I recommend, for brevity, we're going to go ahead and move through. But Carol Gray does recommend a formula with certain types of sentences, certain ratios of sentences. Judy and I have had flexibility with our use of the different types of sentences, but overall, we have a lot of positive language, and we'll show you some examples in a couple minutes.
So the big part is whenever we are trying something new, we want to have some background on why we want to do this. And social stories work for so many different areas. There's lots of research that says it decreases undesirable behaviors. For example, talking out in the classroom, undesirable lunchtime behaviors, frustration, coping with homework, school transitions. There's great research by multiple authors that say this works. It also increases peer play and social interactions. In a moment, you're going to see an example of a book we wrote called Joining In, and you'll see the board maker pictures in that book. There's great research that says this can teach social skills. And a lot of our children are not picking these up just by being in a classroom. They need direct instruction on things like personal space, eye contact, and this will help them learn those skills. And again, it can be repeated and extended beyond the school counselor's office. Also, a lot of our children have difficulty with emotional regulation. This will help them recognize their feelings, understand their feelings, and generalize emotions. Even just basic classroom routines, sitting and attending in a classroom. A lot of our children are arriving now without preschool experience, and they need instruction on how do you participate in circle time. How do you sit at your desk? How do you look at and attend to the teacher? How do we take the perspective of others? I use a lot of social stories with conflict resolution. Children need often direct instruction on how to solve a conflict. Also, preparation for new events. We talked about that earlier. Kindergarten, high school transition, middle school transition, leaving to go to another school. And then, of course, we all obviously want all of our children to feel safe and comfortable. And that's why having good self-regulation skills for all the students. And these books can be used as a classroom guidance lesson, it can be used in group sessions, and it can be used with the individual child. So remaining calm, being able to participate in the class are skills that every school needs. So those are some basic statistics that you can refer to if you're presenting this to your principal or parent. This is already done for you. You can just simply use this slide.
All right, next, as we mentioned, there are many different ways to do social stories. You can do a pre-made story that someone has made for you. Judy and I made this story along with her, I think it was your speech pathologist. And so what we've done is we did this, and so I would keep copies. I had about a dozen copies of these blank ones in my desk. So when someone came in, this was a common issue, I could adapt this to them. So this is an example of a pre-made book. We'll show you an example of a book that I made, a story for a child individually that we made together one-on-one. And then there are apps. I've heard of some great apps. Touch Autism, Touch Autism. Touch Autism is a website that has a free social story app. And I've heard great things. I've looked at the website. It's on my to-do list is to use that. I think, although I'm not a practicing school counselor, I still have lots of kids in my life. I have 2 children of my own, so it's been on my mental list to use the Touch Autism. And it can be used again for all children despite the name, Touch Autism. So here's an example of one of our stories called Joining In, and this is Boardmaker as well. Boardmaker is a fantastic program. A lot of school districts have it for their special education teachers, but again, this was a tool that I think a lot of folks can use, because as a special ed teacher, what I've heard is a lot of strategies for special education teachers are really just good teaching as opposed to special education, so to speak. So Joining In. I would sit down and read this with a student, and they would use it as a workbook that they would circle and fill in blanks. And we read this together. I see many groups of people. Let's name some groups of people I see at recess or lunch. So perhaps this child comes to me and they're having a hard time joining in, knowing what group to join in when they're at recess. So we say, all right, let's talk about some groups of people that you see at recess. So they name a couple groups, the Star Wars group, the jump rope group, kickball group, etc. I may feel nervous at first, but this is okay. So again, it's normalizing how they may feel. I watch the group to see what they are doing and listen to what they are talking about. So again, it's giving them some prompting with what they should do when they see a group. So they're not just jumping in impulsively. I choose one group. So this is a time where I may make a plan with the child, and I say, okay, you name these 3 different groups happening at recess. What is one group that you want to join? And we'll make this goal. So tomorrow at recess, what's one group you can join? And they will write it down. I wait for a good time to join in. Some good times to join in are, and again, it's very concrete and specific. It's very behavioral, what that will look like. And I may do some role playing and practicing with students. I think about what I want to say. Okay, things to say are, and I'm again making this appropriate, culturally appropriate to your students. Okay, things to say when I want to join a game are, so again, it's some more examples of what they could say. Maybe they're doing some role playing. I would love to role play this with students. I use their rules for the game. How many times have you all talked with students where they are joining a group, let's say for a game or activity, but they want to use their own rules rather than go along with what the group is doing? And dynamics are very complex, social dynamics. So oftentimes there are folks that may be a natural leader in the group. So kind of talking with students about that, who is leading the group, who tends to make some of the decisions, what are the rules, and again, trying to break these more complex social issues into more discrete, smaller pieces. I look for a friendly face. That's important. So asking them, who is one person that looks friendly in the group, and who could you perhaps approach? I think, Judy, you were going to say something.
Right. And when you're designing your social stories too, think about potential obstacles and write them into your story. Have a plan for them. So when things come up, they know how to work around that potential obstacle. For example, if they have different rules than you do, we just covered. Or if you pick someone and it doesn't work out. And again, we want to be as positive as we can, because a lot of the kids are anxious about joining in a new group, or trying something new. So when you write these stories, think about all your students you're dealing with and the obstacles they're facing, and try to incorporate as many of those into your base social story that you can. And you can always take pages out or add pages in as well, depending on the child.
That's a great point, Judy. And as well as, again, it is so important that these are culturally relevant. I remember talking to someone, my sister, actually, she does social stories and works with children with autism, and she was talking about, she used to run these social skill groups, clinical in nature, outside of the schools, for like many weeks at a time. And one thing that she said is there were some folks that may want to teach a child, like when you meet someone new, you shake their hand and say, hi, nice to meet you. But of course, we want to be appropriate with that. So if again, I may teach my children that's appropriate to do. However, it's about context. So if you have a 7-year-old or a 15-year-old that walks up to their friends in the middle of school and holds their hand out and wants to shake their hand and say, nice to meet you, that may not be appropriate. For that context versus maybe meeting an adult in a more formal setting with their family, that may be appropriate then. So again, it's so much about context and culture. So in this slide, it talks about looking into their eyes and face. Again, it's very much culturally appropriate. Social skills is what we want to be mindful of when we do tweak these stories for our population. Again, positive, I know I can do it. Sometimes you pick the wrong group or person, it does not work, and this is okay. There are lots of groups and people to choose from. I will find the right one. It gets easier to join. I am proud when I try. So in a nutshell, you can see some of the positive language. It's reaffirming. We have pictures. So this picture of like feeling proud, feeling happy, and the use of very simple language, very simple visuals, as well as another benefit. So we would typically make a story like this, and it would be a workbook that the child circles and adds. And with their permission, we may send a copy home to family and then have a copy in their classroom. And we would ask family members to go ahead and read the story with their child once a day for, let's say, 2 weeks or so. And the beauty of that is this almost becomes like a self-script or that self-talk in their mind where, oh, I tried my best, it did not work out, that's okay, or I might feel nervous at first, or I can look for a friendly face. So all of a sudden, they may start internalizing some of these instructions to help them. And again, doing role playing with them and having all the stakeholders on board. So this is one example of a pre-made social story using BoardMaker. And Judy, yes, what else?
And it also helps our families help the child, because sometimes our parents also struggle with these social skills, and it gives them the coaching that they need so they can help their children. And sometimes we forget, we assume all adults know these, but sometimes many of our parents struggle as well.
That is such a great point. I've had parents jokingly tell me, like, these social stories are fantastic, because really it's somewhat coaching the parents as well, if the parents reading it and giving them some clues. But I've had parents jokingly ask if there are social stories for adults as well, because social skills is something that's lifelong, as we know. So think about a student of yours that you may, as we continue on, so think about a student that may struggle socially or that could use this, and just go ahead and put that in the back of your mind. Anything else, Judy, before we move on to data?
There's lots of great uses for this, and when I first learned about this, it seemed very simple and very simplistic, but it does work, and it works with a variety of issues, a variety of populations. And while it came out of the autism literature, it's really helped a lot of children. And all children go through transitions. All children go through times in their lives that are stressful. And we want them to have good skills. And someone mentioned about preventative skills. These can certainly be taught in advance to all of our children. From the transition from, for example, kindergarten to first grade, you could do a guidance lesson. How to register for classes in middle school. And again, you're going to change your pictures and your language depending on your population and the age level. But it has applications to a wide variety of populations. It's supported by the research, and we really get great buy-in from our stakeholders. Sometimes people don't always know what happens in the school counseling office. In this way, they're part of the whole process, and we really have had a lot of buy-in from parents and staff with these concrete visuals and direct instruction in the social stories.
That's a great points, Judy. And making it developmentally appropriate, as you said. I talked to a school counselor who used selfies because selfies are so big right now, the selfie stick. So to make it more appropriate for a sixth grader, she had the pictures in their social story be selfies that the child, took. And that was a lot of fun. Next, we're going to move on to data. And what is data? So as we know, data and school counseling, they fit together, as the ASCA national model calls for us as school counselors to be able to show how students are different as a result of a comprehensive school counseling program, as a result of us as school counselors. How are students different? How is the school different? How is our school counseling program different as a result of implementing a comprehensive model, such as the ASCA model? As you know, as we look at social stories and data in general, we have multi-tiered systems, and most of you, or many of you, are familiar with this from my experience with doing these presentations. We have Tier 1, which are all students, and then students who are in need of Tier 2 and 3 supports, or even more supports. So social stories, you may be writing a social story for children typically who may need some Tier 2 supports, who need a little bit of small group, or even some individual supports that are not long-term necessarily, but some shorter, and it's also very preventative in nature. So I like to kind of think about multi-tiered systems, and I can go more in depth than that, but that's a totally different presentation for another day. Types of school counseling data. Again, we could spend a half a day or even a semester. I'm teaching an entire semester course on comprehensive school counseling programs this semester, so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about data. So my thought is that if you'd like more information on data, let me tell you, if you don't know already, ASCA has so many resources. So this will be a very, very brief outline. So data, according to ASCA, process data, such as the number of participants, details of intervention. So Judy did a, a classroom lesson for 22 students on cultural diversity in December. So that would be examples of process data. Perception data are the students' thoughts, reactions, or knowledge. So by the end of Judy's school counseling classroom lesson that she did, participants could name X, Y, and Z. So it's their thoughts, reactions, and knowledge. And I have a couple examples here. Pre and post-test, needs assessment, surveys, etc. And as I say, the whole enchilada, a big one that we like to look at is outcome data. So looking at concretely, what are the results of what we're doing? How can we show that that is different? For example, can we show that more students are registering for honors classes? Or can we show that attendance has changed? Behavioral discipline referrals have changed, etc. So how can we show, looking at behaviors or student outcomes? And they're often collected from several sources. And examples of data in general: office discipline referrals, suspensions, surveys, anecdotal feedback, things that staff report that we notice. I'm a big fan of positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBIS, or multi-tiered systems. They do have various assessments that we can, and their data collection, which we can utilize within our comprehensive school counseling program. Attendance, behavior, testing, obviously academic, standardized tests, equity and access, homelessness, English language learners, homework completion, GPA, course enrollment, lots of different measures of data, as you all know. And then SMART goals, something else that we could spend a lot of time on, but for brevity here, looking at what are SMART goals. And this is something that the ASCA model recommends. So what's the issue? How can it be measured? What outcome do we want to see? What type of data are we using? And what is the goal? When will something be accomplished? So what we want to do is, in our time together, which will be another probably 10 to 12 minutes, is we want to show 2 case studies to you all with how both Judy and I implemented social stories, data-driven social stories, to work with students. So first of all, I will talk about Miguel. Miguel is a student who I worked with, and he was a student, still is, although I don't work with him any longer, who had autism. And I worked with him doing some social skill groups and through classroom lessons. So I knew him anyway. And he started to have some school refusal, did not want to come to school, had outbursts when he was in school, refusing to do work, refusing to go home, just having a lot more outbursts and some rigidity in his behaviors, which was not like him. He was in the really high functioning in the general ed classroom a lot of the time. Really such a terrific, terrific student. I really enjoyed working with him. And so parents and teachers reported these behaviors that were increasing and had spiked for him over the winter and early spring. So as a result, I thought, if we look at SMART goals, and how can I apply SMART goals? So he is having one more outburst, refusing to complete schoolwork a day, according to teachers. What's something I can measure? So I can measure his tally of outbursts, his behaviors. And so what do I want to do? I want to decrease his outbursts. And this is outcome data. So his outbursts, teachers tallying up how many outbursts he has a day, it's a great example of outcome data, time-bound. So over the next 9-week period, we want those outbursts to decrease. So what can I do? So here's my statement. You can see here in red. And what can I do to meet this, his goal, his SMART goal? I can do a social story as well as collaborate. So what I did is I spoke with his teachers and parents to develop this SMART goal, to gain information, to get background information, what's really going on. And then I met with the student as well to get more information from him. And I decided to do a social story for him to focus on his refusal to participate and attend. So I'm going to show you an example of a social story, the one that we did. I'd also like to use a disclaimer. So what I did here is I have images here that are stock photos from Google, because obviously for confidentiality reasons, I will not be using his pictures, as you can understand. But what I did is I got pictures from his family. So I asked his family to email me a couple of pictures of them, and then we incorporated these pictures in the social story. So what I did is I sat down with the student, he and I together at my computer after we talked about this and agreed this is the goal we wanted to work on together, and we wrote these stories. So I may have asked him some prompting type leading questions about, tell me about your family. Tell me what your family looks like. And he would answer, and this was written in his words. So this is Miguel's family book. He wrote the book with help from me, Mrs. Scott. He will read this book with his mom and his dad. One book will say at mom's house, one at dad's. So you can see our example here of us utilizing the stakeholder support. So both family members had a copy of the book. This is my family. The people in my family are me, my mom, and my dad. So I had a picture, and as I mentioned, this is a stock photo. So I inserted a picture of him and his two family members. We used to live in one house. Again, these are his words. My parents do not live together anymore. My parents are divorced. I live in two houses. My parents live in two houses. So I had a picture of each house from each family member. This is a picture of my mom's house. This is a picture of me and my mom. I like to be with my mom. This is a picture of my dad's house and me and my dad. I like to be with my dad. So again, it's just very basic, simple wording that, again, are his words. He was going to have increased buy-in and motivation because he literally wrote this book. And these pictures that are very, special to him because they're his family. So Judy mentioned earlier the importance of having these individualized books that speak to students, and how do you get more individualized than this? And again, we used Microsoft Word for this, and then I saved it as a PDF. My parents do not live together. My parents are divorced. They're not married, but they both love me very much. I love my mom. I love my dad. I like to come to my school, Blank Elementary. So we put a picture in of his school. I like the teachers at my school, and I need to use a disclaimer. He knew I was a school counselor, and we talked about what that meant. And for him, it was easier to categorize me as a teacher or as an educator, although we know I'm a counselor. Some of my teachers I like at my school are, and he chose teachers that were important and special to him. And we put pictures in, including me, so I made the cut. There I am, one of three. There are lots of things I like at school. I like SME and fraction circle. So I asked him, again, I wanted to end this on a positive note. What are things you like about school to reinforce the things that he did like, the teachers that he liked, the staff that he liked, the activities that he liked to do at school. So I ended the story on that note. So if you think about this book, if he's reading this book over once a day with his family, and it's really giving him an opportunity to process what is going on for him and to make sense of what's going on. So as a result, we saw over time that his behaviors did decrease. So we had the social story. I also, from talking with the student, realized there was some confusion from him about where was he going, who was picking him up, who was dropping him off, because that consistency is important for really pretty much all students can thrive with having some consistency and they know what to expect. However, children with autism, as we know, are even more, have the propensity to have rigidity, and that is part of the clinical disorder. So as a result of that, with him not knowing where he was going, what was going on, also increased his anxiety. So in addition to having the social story, we worked on a family calendar, and so his environment was more predictable and he knew what was going to happen. So as a result of those two things, his behaviors decreased. So he and I, we wrote this story over a couple weeks together in my office. We read it a couple of times. He was comfortable. He wanted to share it with his family and his teachers, had copies there. And then over some time, his behaviors decreased and our weekly meetings decreased as well. And so I still kept meeting with him as part of classroom lessons and social skill groups here and there. But this was, again, looking at social stories as a short-term intervention. We didn't meet forever, but we met and then tallied his behaviors, was able to chart. We could chart how they decreased. And then he was able to not need my services for that anymore as he, however, if something was different and he needed more services, we would get someone else involved that could provide more longer-term services. So in a nutshell, that's one case study. And I think what we're going to do is take questions at the end. So we're going to move forward. And Judy's going to talk about her case study with her student named Jason.
I'll give you a quick synopsis. I know we're running close on time here. Jason was a student who came to me in first grade with many challenges. His parents had just divorced. His brother was in jail. The family had just moved. They were dealing with poverty. And he was going through a lot of challenges with missing his father and his brother. He had a lot of anger, a lot of aggression. He was in the office pretty much daily, sometimes a couple times a day. He had a lot of trouble interacting with the students. As I talked about before, he was our student who didn't know how to solve problems other than with his fists. So he needed some basic instruction on how to function in the classroom, on how to get along with others, and even what were appropriate topics to talk to the other students about. He had a lot of difficulty with self-regulation, and so a lot of our other students kind of moved away and they didn't quite know how to handle him, so they stayed away. And we wanted him to participate in the class, to get the basic routines down, to be able to socialize, and basically not to be in the principal's office every day. So we worked very hard with several people, including his mother. I worked on basic routines at home with his mother. They had gone through a lot of transitions. He had seen a lot of things that other children really shouldn't be seeing. So we had to talk with him about what was appropriate to talk to other children about and what topics were off limits with other children, because also we didn't want him to develop a reputation in the community. So I set some smarter goals, and to me the first thing we wanted to work on is office referrals. And we wanted to see in the next 3 months, I wanted to decrease his office referrals related to aggression. So we wanted him to stop the aggressive behaviors, or at least reduce them, which would also in turn lead to decreased office referrals. So I used a social story, and as well as tried to meet his basic needs. I was able to work with the family to get him free lunch and other things that the children had, school supplies, medical care, and then eventually additional psychological care outside of the school. And that was very important. I had to meet those basic needs, and I had to use social stories to teach him behaviors. I used our book that we wrote is I Can Choose Better Behaviors, and it talks about what are appropriate behaviors, what's too much, what's too little, what's just right. And I also followed up with his classroom teacher, and we also were able to obtain special education services for him, because in addition to his home environment and his anger issues, he had some significant learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder, as well as a medical issue. So we really used a team approach with the principal, and he had a copy of the behavior stories, social stories in his office, the special education teacher, the homeroom teacher, even my school secretaries really became involved in coaching this child of what is expected in the morning and what is a healthy breakfast. And over time, with meeting the needs, there's counseling by the school counselor, community counseling, and I worked with mom just on some basic parenting skills and sent the social stories home with her so she knew what we were expecting and could reinforce that. The office referrals went from daily to weekly. It was one of the most challenging cases we were facing. This little guy had a lot of obstacles he was up against, but we really worked hard, and he was able to develop some friendships and become successful in school. And he became quite a character around our school. A lot of people knew him. But it took time, and it took a lot of different social stories to reach that goal. And I know we're running out of time here, and we're going to take some questions as well.
Well, real quick, before we do questions, I want to show you all one more thing. In addition to having a full story, sometimes Jude and I would use these, we call them one-sheet wonders or cheat sheets. And we would put some key social strategies on one page, and a child could put that on their desk or keep that in a folder, take it home with them. And this would just be something that we would individualize to them that would just be quicker than a book with just one page. So here's an example. And Judy and I made some of these with the help of her art teacher. So it was an in-home project, so the art teacher made these graphics. You can also find graphics a number of places, images. I use a lot of mine from Google Images, obviously ones that are not copyrighted. So Google Images, Boardmaker, Clip Art, things like that, or have children draw their own pictures to complement their story. And on that note, so think about your student. I hope you can reflect on them a little bit in terms of what you can take from our presentation and potentially apply towards them. And we have a number of resources. So and there's a third article that I can mention as well. So here on the left is an example. It talks about this student, the case study that I talked about. I actually wrote up and was published in the ASCA journal, Professional School Counseling, and so it goes into more detail there. Judy and I also wrote this article on the right, which was in the ASCA magazine within the last couple years, and it talks about how to use visuals and social stories and school counseling interventions in general. And I had an article that came out in the ASCA journal as well, just in the last 4 weeks or so. It's a study where I interviewed a number of school counselors on their use of social stories, and I looked for themes across participants. So overall, school counselors view social stories as a very powerful process to use as part of a comprehensive school counseling program, so with some challenges as well, such as the use of time and resources, but also overall very positive. So if you would like any of these resources, you can see examples here. Please email either Judy or I. You have our emails at the beginning of the presentation. And if you email me, for example, I'm happy to email you all 3 of these articles. And any other way that either of us can help you, please let us know. So with that, references we can provide, we would love to hear from you with reactions and questions you have for us.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, please see the questions tab on the GoToWebinar menu on the right-hand side of your screen. And there you can type in the question and we'll get to it. We do have one question so far. What might be some examples of using social stories at the high school level? How would you recommend getting teenager buy-in?
I think we can certainly, having worked with that population, some of the kids struggled with hygiene. They struggled with things. I had children who were typically 17 to 22, how to balance their checkbook, how to live independently, how to live with a roommate, what is expected in terms of cleaning if you're living with a roommate, what is an appropriate relationship, how do we choose a friend, when is it time to walk away, what is appropriate when dating someone, what's the expected behavior at prom. They don't have to be a big elaborate story, sometimes it can even be as small as one sheet, how to register for classes. Some of our children need more enforcement and direct instruction to reduce that anxiety. The first day of middle school, I have a little boy right now who just recently got diagnosed with autism. He came to us this year, and I'm working with him on what to expect for the registration process, and then I'll write another social story for him about what to expect the first day of middle school. And also that could easily be translated into the first day of high school. But a lot of these children need specific information on what is appropriate dating behavior as well.
And on that note, in terms of making it developmentally appropriate, I mentioned earlier the use of selfies. So maybe they're taking pictures and incorporating them. Or technology is so big, looking at apps online that would be appropriate, and perhaps that'd be a better way, is some of these programs you can create the app and then send it to someone else's phone or computer or tablet or whatnot. And so that could be another great way of utilizing it. What other questions?
Okay, do you have any examples for higher socially functioning students?
Yes, all the social studies can be used with children with higher functioning, what we used to call Asperger's, now call higher functioning ASDs. Again, you can use more direct language and not a simplistic language because they have a better understanding of more complex language than our children who are lower functioning. And they need things, basic help with like level. A lot of my high functioning children with autism struggle with volume of their voice. So I've written a social story on a just right voice because they tend to talk louder than other people. So that's the first one I can think of.
And on that note as well, I think in addition to autism, we've used these with all different types of students. So I remember a girl who I work with who was gifted, very socially advanced. She had lots of friends. She was on the student body, like the student government. She was voted into that. But she really struggled with anxiety. So we made social stories for her on how to cope with her anxiety. So we picked a character that she really liked. She loved Cinderella, and wrote a story about Cinderella. When Cinderella gets anxiety about tornadoes and tornado drills, this is what she can do. And we made a list of strategies that she could implement. So also English language learners, adjustment issues, families divorced, siblings in the hospital getting cancer treatments, etc. So it's just a way you can use this for almost anything: adjustment, emotions, behaviors, anticipating events, etc.
Also, I have a little girl whose father had ALS. So we did some research together on ALS and wrote some coping skills down for her. Her dad really wanted to make sure that she knew what it was and knew what was coming. Very high functioning in our AAP program, but it was a safe way for her to do research and write a story, and then she could carry that with her as she moved on to middle school. Or if the child is dealing with their own unexpected medical challenge. We've had children with all different types of medical issues here, from RP, losing their eyesight, learning disabilities, ADHD, and certainly anxiety is a big issue for our higher functioning children that they need coping strategies for.
Great, very good. What else?
Where is a good place to find social stories that are already made up or created?
There are a handful of places you can look on Amazon. Jed Baker, is it Baker or Barker? Jed Baker, I think. Baker has books. Carol Gray has books. We have books on Amazon. Teachers Pay Teachers have books. Searching online, those are a handful. Amazon, Teachers Pay Teachers. Where else, Judy? Apps as well.
And certainly autism websites often will have them as well. Sometimes it's helpful to order one or two that you can kind of base your stories on. And I promise you, as you begin to write them more and more, it will take less and less time. When we initially wrote these, it would take us 2 to 3 hours to write one. We tried to get a planning day if we could, back when we had those wonderful days. But after you've been writing them for a while, you can do them pretty quickly, sometimes even in 45 minutes. And then they help a variety of students. So think of it often as an investment in time for your population. And I promise you, you will use them over and over again, particularly stories on behavior, coping skills, self-regulation. They will come in handy.
And also with that, oh, you're writing it over, it may take 45 minutes, but the student I sat down and Miguel and wrote it with him, it probably took 3 sessions. We would sit down, we'd talk a little bit, and then we'd sit in front of the computer. And that also makes it developmentally appropriate because you're using their words. And you're not doing it all in one sitting. So it may take 45 minutes, but over three weeks, that's 15 minutes a time, which is very doable, I find.
And for the more general books too, sometimes I have my children who they get in trouble more often than others. They tend to be very tech savvy, and I've even pulled them into a group at lunch. As long as the book doesn't have any names in it, they're able to pull pictures off the internet very quickly. They're very skilled in that area. So you can turn it into a positive project for them or a special buddy project for them.
With having, knowing that you're in a school that have filters on the images that would pop up. So that's, I would investigate that first to make sure that they couldn't pull up any inappropriate pictures because that could be a problem for sure. Otherwise, what else? What other questions?
That is actually all the questions we have coming in. So I believe are you going to share your contact information? If they have any questions that come up after the fact, they can certainly email you or us at ASCA, and I can relay that information. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. All right, and that really concludes the webinar for today. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you ladies for the presentation. Again, we'll post this webinar on our website, schoolcounselor.org. We'll also be offering other webinars in the next upcoming months, so please also check those out. You can register for them, again, schoolcounselor.org/webinars. Thank you everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope everyone has a
day.
good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.